The sky burned red as ships clashed above the broken world. Explosions echoed across the horizon, shaking the ground where humans and aliens faced each other with no mercy. Smoke rose like a wall, hiding the sun, and the air smelled of ash and blood. Darius stood in the ruins with his fists clenched. His body was scarred from years of battle, his muscles heavy with strength and rage. He was one man against an army, but his eyes burned with something more dangerous than numbers. He carried no gun. He carried no shield. He carried only his will to fight. The alien ranks moved like shadows through the smoke. They were tall and armored, their eyes glowing with strange light. They believed they had already won, that humanity was nothing but a dying spark. But Darius did not bow. He stepped forward into the battlefield, his breath slow, his heart steady, and the ground trembled with his weight. Among the soldiers, a blue-skinned girl knelt on the dirt. She was young, her hair dark, her beauty clear even to the grime of war. Her hands trembled as she looked up at Darius, unsure she was staring at her savior or her executioner. Around her, the soldiers paused, confused by the silence between the two. Even war seemed to stop to hear what would be said. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "What was that?" she asked, staggering as if her body could not carry the weight of her fear. Her words were sharp against a storm of noise. She stared at him as though waiting for truth that could decide her fate. The entire battlefield seemed to lean closer to his answer. Darius lowered his head, his voice calm and heavy. "My first move," he said. He did not shout. He did not roar. His tone carried the weight of finality, the promise that more was to come. He looked at the girl as though she was the only one in the world who could hear. Then he raised his hand and clenched it into a fist. The earth cracked. A line of fire burst from the soil, ripping between the alien soldiers. They stumbled back in shock, their formation broken. The girl gasped, her wide eyes glowing the flames that licked the battlefield. The other soldiers roared in confusion, pointing their weapons toward him, but none dared to fire first. Fear spread faster than command. The girl's lips trembled as she whispered, her voice lost in the thunder. "Want to see the last?" His words cut through her thoughts before she could even ask. He had already answered the question that had not yet left her tongue. His chest rose with each breath, his scars glowing in the firelight, and his figure stood like a shadow of something ancient and unbroken. Above, a ship fell burning from the sky, crashing into ground with a force that shook the battlefield. Dust swallowed the horizon. The aliens reeled as the shockwave hit them. Yet Darius stood unmoved, like a mountain against a storm. The girl pressed her hand against her chest as if to steady her racing heart. In that moment, she knew the war was not just between armies. It was between this man and the entire galaxy. The battlefield smoldered with fire as silence stretched across the broken land. Darius stood in the center, his chest rising slowly, his shadow stretching long to the dust and flame. Around him, the alien ranks wavered, their confidence cracked for the first time since the war began. The blue-skinned girl kept her eyes fixed on him, her hands pressed into the dirt, as if the ground itself could protect her. She could not understand how one human could shake the very earth with his will. Her people had fought humans for years, and none had ever stood like this one. She felt both fear and awe at the same time. The alien commander stepped forward. His armor glistened with firelight, his voice cut like steel. "You are only one man. Do you think you can fight an army?" His words carried across the battlefield, and the soldiers around him tightened their grip on their weapons. Yet not a single one moved closer to Darius. Darius turned his head slowly, his eyes narrowing on the commander. His scars told of countless battles. Each one survived, each one endured. "One man is enough," he said, his voice steady and low. The girl felt a chill run down her spine as his words hung in the air like thunder waiting to strike. The soldiers broke formation and began to advance. Their steps shook the ground, their armor clashing with each movement. The girl flinched, expecting the human to be torn apart. Yet Darius did not move back. He stood tall, his muscles tensed, his hand tightening into a fist once more. Fire still lingered in the cracks of the earth around him. With a roar, the first wave of aliens charged. Their blades gleamed, their rifles burned with energy. Darius leapt forward into them like a storm. His bare hands struck harder than steel, his body faster than their eyes could follow. Every strike broke bone, every movement shattered armor. He was not just fighting. He was breaking the belief that they could win. The girl gasped as she watched. She had seen many battles. She had seen her people crush human cities, burn their homes, and take their land. But never had she seen a human fight like this. It was as if he carried the rage of every fallen soldier within him. The battlefield became a stage, and death followed wherever he moved. The commander shouted orders, but his men faltered. Some stumbled back. Others hesitated, their courage melting in the face of the impossible. Darius threw one soldier into another, their armored bodies colliding with a crash. He snatched a blade from an enemy and turned it into a weapon of his own, moving with a fury that could not be stopped. At last, the girl found her voice. "Why are you fighting like this?" she cried out, her words trembling. "You are only one man. Why not run?" She could not understand why he did not save himself. He could have vanished into the ruins, left the war to others, but instead he stood here against thousands. Darius did not look at her, yet his words reached her all the same. Because this is not only my war. This is every human's war. If I fall, they will believe we are broken. But if I stand, they will know we will never bend. His voice thundered across the fire and smoke. The girl felt her chest tighten, as if the truth had struck her harder than any weapon. The commander raised his hand, signaling his final command. The second wave of soldiers moved forward, their weapons glowing brighter, their armor heavier. The ground shook beneath their march, and the air filled with the sound of war. Yet still Darius did not yield. His eyes burned brighter than the flames, and his body stood unbroken in the heart of destruction. The second wave came like a wall of steel and fire. The alien soldiers marched with heavy steps, their weapons glowing in the smoke. They moved as one, trained to crush any resistance, their discipline stronger than fear. Yet their eyes still flicked toward the lone human who had already broken their lines once. Darius lifted the captured blade in his hand. The metal shone with alien energy, humming like thunder before a storm. His grip was tight, his scar stretched across his arm, his stance firm. He did not move back. Instead, he leaned forward, like a predator waiting for the exact moment to strike. The blue-skinned girl rose slowly from the dirt. Her knees trembled, but her eyes did not leave the human. She did not understand what force moved inside him. He was not like the others she had seen fall. He fought with something greater than strength, something unshakable. She whispered to herself without knowing why, as if repeating words from a memory she did not own. The aliens charged. Their rifles spat burning light. Their blades cut through the air with deadly speed. Darius moved into them with fury, his body twisting, his weapon cutting arcs of fire. He fought like a storm-given flesh. He was not just one man fighting. He was an answer to their arrogance. Each strike told them that their belief in conquest would not last. Bodies fell around him. Armor shattered under his strikes. Flames burst as weapons cracked apart. The battlefield became chaos. Smoke curling around the clash of steel and the roar of war. The girl covered her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. She had believed humans were weak, but now she saw something terrifying. They were not weak. They were relentless. The alien commander's voice rose above the noise. He shouted orders, but his tone carried frustration. His men were breaking again. Their lines were bending under the will of one human. He raised his own weapon, a long spear glowing with dark energy, and pointed it toward Darius. His voice echoed like a promise of death. Darius turned his gaze toward the commander. Their eyes locked through the haze of smoke and fire. One man against an army, and yet the commander felt his chest tighten. For a brief moment, he saw not a man, but something far older, something born from every war humanity had endured. He tightened his grip on the spear, unwilling to let fear take root. The girl stepped forward, her voice trembling but loud enough to reach both sides. "Stop this," she cried. "You will not win by killing him. Can you not see? He is more than a soldier." Her words were swallowed by the clash of battle. Yet some of the soldiers hesitated. They glanced at her as though unsure she was speaking truth or madness. Darius did not speak. He simply moved. His blade met the commander's spear in a clash that rang across the field. Sparks burst like stars, the force shaking the ground beneath them. The two stood locked in power, their weapons grinding, their strength pushing against each other. The fight between armies had now become a duel between leaders. The girl's heart raced as she watched. Her people's commander was strong, trained, and armed with the best weapon their kind had forged. Yet Darius pushed against him with nothing but his will and his body. The sound of their clash echoed through the smoke, louder than all the rifles and explosions around them. The commander snarled and struck again. His spear cut through the air, tearing the ground where Darius had stood. But Darius moved faster than his eyes could follow. He closed the distance and slammed his blade against the commander's chest plate. The armor cracked. The commander staggered back, his face twisted in disbelief. The battlefield froze in silence as all eyes turned toward him. The commander staggered back with his chest plate cracked. The soldiers around him froze, their eyes wide with disbelief. They had never seen their leader push so far. The ground itself seemed to hold its breath as silence spread through the battlefield. Darius lowered his blade, but did not step back. His chest rose slowly, his eyes fixed on the enemy before him. The blue-skinned girl clutched her chest as she watched. She had never thought one man could stand against so many. Her people had believed humans were weak and desperate. Yet here was proof of something different. She felt a spark inside her, something that pulled her loyalty away from the army she had known all her life. She did not know if it was fear or hope, but it burned stronger with each passing moment. The commander roared and struck again. His spear blazed with power as he lunged forward. Sparks flew when the blade met the spear. The force of the clash sent shockwaves across the ground, throwing dirt into the air. Soldiers staggered back from the blast. The duel was no longer just strength against strength. It was belief against belief. Darius gritted his teeth and pressed forward. Each strike of his blade shook the air. Each step forced the commander back. The human fought with nothing but his body and the weapon he had stolen, yet his spirit burned brighter than any machine. He moved like a storm tearing through stone. The commander's confidence began to crack with every clash. The girl shouted, her voice ringing across the fire and smoke. "Stop this war. Can you not see it? He cannot be broken." Her voice carried more weight than she expected. Some soldiers turned to her, their weapons lowering for the first time. Doubt spread across the lines like fire through dry grass. Even the strongest walls could fall when belief was shaken. The commander snarled and turned his glare toward her. "Silence," he barked, his voice sharp as a blade. "You are nothing but a witness. Your words mean nothing." But even as he spoke, he could feel the hesitation in his army. He knew that if this duel ended with his defeat, the entire war would shift in a single breath. Darius took advantage of his distraction. He lunged forward, driving his blade against the commander's spear, pushing him to his knees. The metal screeched as sparks burst between them. The commander strained, his muscles burning, but he could not hold back the weight pressing down on him. For the first time, fear flickered in his eyes. The soldiers who watched saw it too, and their hearts faltered. The girl stepped closer, her body trembling but her voice steady. "If you continue, all that will remain is ash. Look at him. Look at what he stands for. No force in this galaxy can erase what he carries. You will destroy yourself before you destroy him." Her words carried into silence. For a moment, even the fire seemed to pause to hear her. Darius's blade pressed harder, forcing the commander to the ground. The alien leader gasped as the weight became too much. His armor cracked further, the sound echoing across the field. He tried to rise, but the human strength would not allow it. Around them, the soldiers shifted uneasily, their discipline breaking apart like glass. The war was hanging by a single thread. At last, Darius spoke, his voice low and steady. "This is not the end of one battle. This is the beginning of your truth. You think strength is numbers. You think power is weapons. But real power is the will to stand when everything else falls." His words cut deeper than any blade. They settled in the hearts of every soldier, leaving a silence heavier than thunder. The commander lay on the ground with his armor cracked and his pride torn apart. His soldiers stared in silence, their hands tightening around their weapons, but their hearts trembling. They had never seen him fall. The sight of his defeat was a wound far deeper than any blade could bring. Darius stood over him with his blade pointed down. His breath was steady, his body scarred, but his will unbroken. He looked at the commander as though he were already a shadow of the past. The fire around them burned higher, painting the battlefield in light and ash. The human did not speak, yet his silence carried more weight than orders. The blue-skinned girl stepped closer. Her voice was clear now, filled with strength she had not known she possessed. "It is over," she said, her words echoing across the still field. "Your war is broken. Look at him. You thought humans weak, but what you see now is truth." The soldiers shifted uneasily, their eyes drawn to her as much as to Darius. The commander gritted his teeth and forced himself to rise. His hands shook as he lifted his spear once more. "It is not over," he spat, though his words lacked power. His knees bent under his own weight, but his pride forced him to stand. His soldiers watched with doubt, their loyalty cracking with every second he struggled. Darius raised his blade slowly. His eyes locked on the commander without anger, only certainty. "If you rise again, it will not be for battle. It will be for surrender," he said. The words cut sharper than steel, and even the air seemed to still in their wake. The girl's breath caught as she realized he had given the commander one last chance. For a moment the commander hesitated. His pride screamed for him to fight, but his heart knew the truth. He could not defeat this man. No army could. Yet his hand trembled as he gripped his spear, unwilling to bow before the human. His silence stretched, and in that silence, his army began to fracture. A soldier dropped his weapon. Another followed. Soon a ripple moved across the ranks as more weapons fell to the dirt. The sound was louder than thunder to Commander's ears. His men were surrendering not because he ordered it, but because they no longer believed. The girl closed her eyes and felt a weight lift from the air. The war was shifting before her eyes. The commander roared in fury and tried to strike one last time, but his arm moved too slow, his body too broken. Darius stepped aside and struck with precision. His blade shattered the spear into pieces, the fragments scattering across the dirt. The commander collapsed once more, this time without the strength to rise. His roar faded into silence, leaving only defeat behind. The girl looked at Darius with wide eyes. He stood tall, his blade lowered, his body like a wall against despair. She felt something stir inside her chest, something she had never felt before. She realized she was no longer afraid of him. She was afraid of what it meant for her people to face someone like him. Yet part of her wanted to stand beside him, not against him. Darius turned his gaze to the fallen soldiers. "Leave this place," he said, his voice firm. "Take your wounded. Take your dead. But carry with you the truth you have seen today. Humanity does not bow. Humanity does not break." His words echoed across the ashes, and not a single soldier dared to disobey. The field of battle grew quiet as the smoke began to settle. The alien soldiers moved slowly, carrying their wounded, their weapons left behind in the dirt. None dared to raise their eyes to Darius. Their faith had been broken, and in its place was a heavy silence that carried across the ruins. The firelight flickered against their armor as they retreated step by step. Darius lowered his blade and let it fall into the dirt. He did not need it anymore. His body still ached from the struggle, his blood dripping from cuts along his arms. Yet his stance remained unshaken. He stood not as a soldier, but as a symbol. The battle was no longer about weapons or numbers. It had become a battle of truth, and the truth had already spoken. The blue-skinned girl approached him with careful steps. Her heart raced, her voice caught in her throat, but her eyes did not leave him. "Why did you spare them?" she asked softly. She had expected him to end them all. She had seen humans fall to her kind without mercy, yet he had chosen a different path. Her confusion was clear in every word. Darius looked at her, his gaze steady. "Killing them would only feed the fire," he said. "But letting them go will spread the truth faster than any death could. Fear dies with the body, but belief lives when men carry it home." His words struck her like steel, firm and undeniable. She lowered her head, unable to answer, because deep down she knew he was right. The soldiers continued to scatter, leaving only the commander on the ground. He lay broken, his armor cracked beyond repair, his weapon shattered. His breaths came heavy and slow. He stared at Darius with a mix of hate and awe, unable to rise again. For the first time in his life, he was forced to accept that he was not the strongest on the field. The girl knelt beside Darius, her eyes moving between the fallen commander and the human, who still stood tall. "What will you do now?" she asked. Her voice trembled, though not from fear. There was a strange curiosity in her tone, as if she wanted to know the path he would walk next, as if part of her already wanted to follow it. Darius turned his gaze toward the horizon, where smoke rose from burning ships. His voice was calm. "This war is not finished. This was only one battle. Others will come, stronger than these. But every step we take, every stand we hold, will remind them that humans are not prey. We are the storm that refuses to end." His words rolled like thunder across the empty field. The girl shivered at his answer, though not from cold. She realized he was not fighting only for survival. He was fighting for something larger, something that reached beyond one world or one people. She had been raised to believe her kind were rulers of the stars, yet she now wondered if they had only been waiting for someone like him to prove them wrong. The commander coughed and forced himself to speak. "You think you have won, but more will come. They will burn your worlds. They will bury your people." His voice was weak but carried venom. Yet even in his defiance, there was an edge of fear. He knew he was speaking words he could not make real, for he no longer had the power to deliver them. Darius stepped closer, his shadow falling over the broken leader. "Let them come," he said firmly. "Every army, every weapon, every empire. Let them come, and they will all learn the same truth you have seen today." His words struck like a hammer, final and undeniable. The girl's eyes widened as she realized he was not only speaking to Commander, but to the galaxy itself. The sun dipped behind the smoke-filled sky as the field grew darker. Fires burned across the ruins, lighting the broken world in a dull red glow. The air was heavy with the smell of ash and the weight of silence. The soldiers who had once stood with pride were now shadows retreating into the distance. Their leader lay defeated, and yet the war was far from finished. Darius stood in the center of it all, his body marked with blood and dirt, his chest rising steady with each breath. He had won the battle, but he felt no victory. He knew the fight was only beginning. Every step forward would bring stronger enemies, larger armies, and greater challenges. Yet his eyes held no fear. They burned with a promise that nothing could put out. The blue-skinned girl stayed close, her heart torn between loyalty to her people and the pull of something greater. She had been raised to see humans as enemies. Yet this man had shattered everything she thought was true. She looked at him and saw not just strength, but something deeper. Something that could not be broken by numbers or weapons. She wondered if she could ever return to the life she knew before meeting him. The commander groaned on the ground, clutching his shattered armor. His pride was wounded more than his body. He stared at Darius with hatred, but also with an unwilling respect. His voice was weak, but sharp. "You cannot stop what is coming. You cannot stand against the Empire. They will send more. They will send worse." His words rang hollow against the silence of defeat. Darius stepped closer, his shadow stretching long in the firelight. "Then let them come," he said. His tone was calm, yet it carried the weight of a storm. Every army believes itself unbreakable until it meets the truth. And the truth is this: humans will never kneel. We will never fade. Not while one still stands to fight. His words echoed like a blade drawn across steel. The girl's eyes widened at his voice. She felt it vibrate in her chest, stirring something she had never known before. She whispered, almost to herself, "You are not just man. You are something more." Her words were quiet, yet Darius heard them. He turned his head toward her, his face unreadable, his silence stronger than any answer. Her heart pounded as she realized she might already believe in him. The battlefield trembled as a deep rumble filled the air. Both Darius and the girl turned their eyes skyward. Above the clouds, more ships appeared, their engines roaring like thunder. The Empire had already sent reinforcements. The girl's lips parted in shock as she saw the scale of the fleet. Hundreds of ships cut across the sky, their shadows falling like a storm over the land. This was no longer a battle. This was the beginning of a war that would burn across worlds. The soldiers who had fled stopped in their tracks as they saw the reinforcements above. Their courage returned, though mixed with fear. They looked at Darius again, expecting him to fall to despair at the sight of such power. But he did not tremble. He did not look away. Instead, his grip on his blade tightened, and his stance grew even stronger. His voice rose so all could hear. "This is the Empire you fear," he shouted. "Look at their numbers. Look at their power. But remember this. They bleed as you bleed. They break as you break. And I will show them that even an empire can fall." His voice rolled across the battlefield like thunder, carrying into every ear and every heart. The soldiers stared at him, torn between fear and belief. The girl gasped at his words. Her chest felt heavy, her thoughts spinning. She could not deny it anymore. She knew then that the war was no longer about human survival or alien conquest. It was about him, the man who stood against empires, the man who turned fear into fire, the man who could change the fate of galaxies with nothing but his will. The sky burned with the glow of the Empire's fleet. Hundreds of ships hovered above, their shadows stretching across the land like a storm of steel. The ground shook as engines roared, and soldiers who had once fled now felt courage return in the face of their reinforcements. The girl stared upward with fear in her eyes, but beside her, Darius stood firm, his body still and his eyes unshaken. The commander laughed weakly from the ground, his voice broken but cruel. "Now you will see the truth. Human, you cannot fight the Empire, not when the sky itself belongs to them." His words carried false strength, as if he were clinging to the hope that his defeat could still be hidden beneath the shadow of greater power. Yet his laughter died as he saw Darius lift his head toward the fleet without fear. Darius's hand clenched around the hilt of his blade. His scars glowed faintly in the firelight, his muscles tense and ready. His voice rose, steady and strong, carrying across the battlefield. "You call this power," he said. "You call this victory. But numbers do not decide truth. Weapons do not decide freedom. Will decides. And my will is greater than your empire." His words rolled like thunder through the silence. The soldiers who listened felt their hearts shake. They had been trained to fear their empire more than death. Yet in this moment they found themselves believing the words of the human who stood alone. The girl's breath quickened, her chest heavy with realization. He was not speaking only to the enemy. He was speaking to all who could hear. His words were not for the present battle, but for the future of all who would come after. The first blast came from the sky. A beam of light cut downward, tearing through the ruins and shaking the earth. Dust and fire erupted around them, but when it cleared, Darius still stood, unmoved. His blade was raised high, glowing with energy as though the ground itself had given him strength. The girl gasped, her hands trembling as she watched. She realized that he was no longer just a man in her eyes. He was the storm he had claimed to be. The fleet above shifted, preparing for a second strike. Engines roared louder, the air vibrating with their fury. Yet Darius lifted his voice again, louder than before. "If this is your empire, then let them see. Let them see one man stand when they expect only ashes. Let them see the fire that will not die." His voice pierced the roar of machines, carrying into the very sky itself. The girl's heart pounded as she felt his words burn inside her. She turned to the broken soldiers around her and raised her own voice. "Look at him," she cried. "He is not falling. He is not bending. If he can stand against the Empire, then so can we." Her voice broke through the silence, and for the first time, alien soldiers looked at her with more belief than fear. A spark had begun to spread. The second blast came, brighter than the first. But this time, when the light struck, Darius moved. He leapt forward, his blade cutting through the fire as if splitting the sky itself. The energy shattered around him, scattering harmlessly into the air. A cry rose from the soldiers below, a sound of disbelief mixed with awe. The commander's eyes widened, his lips parting in silent horror. The impossible had become truth. Darius stood tall in the ashes, his blade glowing, his body scarred but unbroken. His voice was calm, almost quiet, but it carried into every ear. "This is my last move," he said, "and it will not end with me. It will live with every man, every woman, every child who dares to stand. Remember what you saw here. Remember that empires fall when one refuses to kneel." His words settled like stone in the hearts of all who listened. The girl fell to her knees, tears burning her eyes. She knew the war would continue, but she also knew nothing would ever be the same. The Empire had brought its full strength, and one human had stood against it. The galaxy would carry his name, whispered with fear by his enemies, and spoken with hope by those who longed for freedom. In that moment, she understood the truth. He was not just a warrior. He was the beginning of a legend,